So, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Becoming Undone. I am so excited for today's episode. I know I say this at the start of every episode, basically, but I am feeling the excitement because today we have a very special guest joining us for the episode. His name is Jagjot Singh. This is somebody that I came across about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, when I was in a very miserable place within myself. I remember jumping onto Google and typing in the words, soul is devastated, because that's truly how I felt in that moment. I was just suffering to such a deep extent, even after doing all of the stuff, practicing Vipassana 2 hours a day, doing all the things that I thought would get me out of pain. Then I typed it in. And then I came across Jagjot's blog and I started reading his work. He writes a lot about the teachings of Advaita Vedanta or non-duality. And that's a part that I have looked into before. I absolutely love it. It calls me. And I found a blog. And the blog basically said this one line that stopped me in my tracks. And it said, there is no doer. I just went, what? What? What does this mean? Then when I continued reading on, there was another sentence in there which got me to, I can't say it got me to surrender, but it felt like it was a sign. It was definitely a sign from God. And I think what you had said was, you can't surrender even if you tried to. It's all God's will. So when I read these words, I felt so compelled to want to connect with Jagjot and invite him to the podcast today, because this podcast is about spiritual awakening. And I know so many of you are going through such a tumultuous time as this process is. And Jagjot is living in New Delhi right now. We connected about a month ago and scheduled the time to chat. I love his work. I think he writes and captures the human condition in such a direct and clear and concise way. And it always hits the spot. And I know that a lot of his teachings are based on ancient philosophies that are already out there. And it's his interpretation. That's what makes it so relatable, actually, that, you say it in your own words. And I would just love to have a conversation now, just see where we go with this very organically. So Jagjot, welcome.
Thank you, Sanya, for this. You were just now speaking about the word, I'm not the doer. So I will begin with what I experienced when I heard those words.
Mhm.
Yes, in the traditional text, I had heard those words before many times. It never sunk in. But at some point, I still remember that day. I was walking on my terrace and just casually listening to one of Ramesh Balsekar's talk. And it would barely have been only 20 minutes or so. And he said these lines that you are not the doer. And I froze in that moment. And it was like, some sort of electricity just captured me. The words just went deep. I had heard it many times before, but the way he said it, it just did something. And then, I was in a state of mixed emotions, ecstasy also, confusion also. And I was running from here and there, just trying to find somebody to tell them, oh, look, I'm not the doer. I'm not the doer.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if somebody would have seen me like that, they would have declared me crazy. But yes, the words hit hard. And in that moment, a lot of clarity about life came. Now, my investigation into this whole spiritual teaching was based not on any idea of enlightenment. It was only based on self-knowledge. I wanted to be comfortable with others. That was the goal I started with. I wanted to harmonious relationships with others. But what I discovered was that till I do not know what's going on within me, there is no possibility for me to have a harmonious relationship with another. So the journey was only inwards. It was only discovering what was going on within. And yes, I did Vipassana, many hours of Vipassana and everything, all the things you mentioned, I did. I literally broke my back and knees, messed up my knees because of that. I'll say it was very helpful. It was very calming. But the words, you are not the doer, instantaneously did what years of meditation or sadhana or any kind of contemplation could not do. And it was clear to me that this was never in my control. It just happened. It happened. I did not will it to happen. It just happened, and there was no possibility for my ego to move anywhere in that moment. It had to surrender. what eventually happens was that I did not get answer to life's question, but the questions themselves began dissolving. The solidity of the questions began disappearing. And that's how I started seeing things in a very different perspective. Now there was no solidness to anything in life, not just to objects, but also to things like thoughts and relationships. There was no solidness to that. So when there is no solidness to that, when there is complete emptiness, then there is an integration. And that integration, the only word I can use for that is unconditional love.
Wow.
And that is what keeps the organism going and, speaking about it. Once you see it, you cannot help about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you said before, because actually, when I typed in those words on Google, soul is devastated. Actually, the article that you wrote, it said something about it is a stage of the ego to get to a stage where it feels like it's defeated. It just can't go anywhere. There's nowhere else for it to go. It's kind of exhausted itself out. That's something that I personally was experiencing. And I would love to hear a bit more about your take on that. I think everyone experiences it differently, I guess, in their own way, but just on your experience.
So yeah, it is just like this, that the mind, the ego mind, the one that is concerned with outcomes, one that thinks it is in control, it is in charge, that mind is not interested in any kind of liberation. That mind is really not interested in knowing the truth. Although it claims that it wants to know the truth, it wants to feel loved, it wants to love others, all these fanciful notions, this mind creates. But deep down, it is all wounded. Deep down, it is all scarred.
Yes.
And what happens usually is that every spiritual teaching, every philosophy sort of becomes a bypassing, sort of becomes a defense mechanism. So, the ego goes through that journey, through that path where it tries to find peace in different teachings, in different masters, in different books, through different theories. But the nature of this mind to be restless, that is its very nature. When this non-dual awareness seizes this mind, it's like, I will put it the way Ramesh Balsekar puts it, because he explains it really well. Imagine ego being the child.
Yeah.
Now the ego says that if I'm not the doer of actions, then who is this me? So what I imagine is a child with a crossed hand in a complete state of surrender. What do I do now? That is the last question. After that, if any answer comes to that question, what do I do now? Who am I, basically? Who is this me?
Yes.
So if any answer comes to that question, that is just the continuation of the same mind.
Correct.
Then that is not surrender. If I say that I am this or I am that, or I am moving in a certain direction, I am progressing, I am becoming better, I am becoming the better version of myself, that is the continuation of that painful, restless, scarred mind. What happens is that in that moment, when the non-duality seizes the ego completely gets to know its unreality. The words may sound a bit, it's to conceptualize this. It is very difficult to explain using words. So the doer ego gets arrested. It's not that the ego is destroyed. Ego never gets destroyed like this. It is only that the sense of doership of the ego gets destroyed. Now the ego knows that there is nothing I can do. What has happened is the surrender. So that is the only thing. And after that, what happens is that the psyche undergoes some sort of a change. Now, it is not that everything changes. No, it is not that life becomes absolutely blissful experience. No, the life continues to be more or less the same. Because we still have relationships, we still have challenges, financial challenges, relationship challenges. All those things are there. The conditioned entity always reacts to them because it is the nature of that entity. It is not that the ego gets destroyed, but the need to seek reassurances, the need to run after validations, that kind of begins to dissolve. So, you may still say, create a piece of art or writing or some content, and you may still go to your loved one to ask them, how did I do? That may still happen, but your happiness does not depend on their response because you have discovered happiness within yourself as your own being. So even if they say it's good it doesn't hit the ego. It doesn't
Mm.
create pride.
Mm.
And if they say, no, it's not good, it's completely useless,
Mm.
it does not injure the ego.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
of course, the pain in the moment is felt. The pain is definitely felt.
Yes. Yes.
There is no avoiding the pain in the moment. And this is one of the greatest realization which came about through Ramesh Balsekar's teaching. And that was, there is nothing the individual can do to avoid the pain in the moment. If it is meant to happen, it will happen.
Mm.
Just as pleasure in the moment is felt, the pain in the moment also is felt. But they never become the individual story.
I mean, you know what you're saying about if it's meant to happen, it happens. So there's obviously this big debate about free will and, the other side of it, which is that it's fatalistic, that things are already kind of there. And I want to share my take on it and I want to hear whether you feel it resonates. But from what I've uncovered so far, I feel that free will is an illusion, that it's just like we've been given this playground and it's sort of like God's like play. But what options we have within that to play is just to keep us entertained. But really, it's all kind of the part that I find hard to grasp is it all destined that I'm going to go on that slide, that I'm going to, or is it that the outcome is destined, but the path that I choose, the way that I choose to play is up to me, which is my form of entertainment. But
Yeah.
that's where I'm at with it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I look at it this way, that all the debate about free will and things being predestined, they all come out from the character's perspective.
Yes.
Because the character is not concerned with the liberation. The character is the ego mind. It is not concerned with liberation. It is only concerned with reinforcing what it already wants to believe, right? And what happens usually is that not having free will or things being predestined is sort of looked upon as nihilistic thinking or fatalistic
Exactly.
thinking.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. It's like if I have a certain condition, certain health problem, then I shouldn't do anything because
If it's all
it is
written
all
out
predestined.
anyway, what's the point? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But says that now I'll start with Ramesh Balsekar's quote, which says that the created object, as in the three-dimensional object, cannot know the will of the creator source. Cannot know the will of the creator source. So you are to act in the moment, whatever you think is right.
Spontaneously.
But remember,
Yes.
spontaneous, but the outcome is never in your control. So when you act with that notion that the outcome is predetermined, then that action does not impact you. Either the action will be in your favor or it will not be in your favor. But it is not going to impact you. If the action happens in your favor, it will not create pride within you. And if the action is not in your favor, it will not create guilt or shame within you. So there is no baggage associated with what is happening. And that is the main thing. The moment you assume that you know God's will, when we say that we are not supposed to do anything about a certain situation, we are assuming God's will. We are assuming that we are supposed to do nothing. But are we really capable of doing nothing?
No, not possible.
If I tell you just do
Yes.
nothing, just sit there,
Yeah.
you cannot do that.
We won't
You will be
last.
sitting there with your thoughts.
Yeah.
With your own mind, with your own thoughts.
Yes.
And the first thought will be that I am not doing anything.
Yes.
But that itself is the concept is that life is all based around action. If you think that a certain action is required for a certain situation, by all means, do your best. That's what I say. Do, but then the outcome is never in your control. When you act with that knowledge, then the quality of your action is very different. Then it is more creative. What you will find is it
That's
is
true.
more creative.
That's true. That sense of worry goes away because you're not focused on what is this going to get me. Yeah, it's kind of like I think Alan Watts has a really beautiful metaphor about it. He says you never listen to a song to get to the end of the song, or you never start dancing to a song to get to the end of it. That's not the purpose of it. It's the actual dancing, the actual singing of it is the purpose. That is it.
Think about it. All the great artists in the world, I say if a great painter like Picasso would think that my painting is going to be the best painting in the world, he would have never painted that way. When you start with that freedom that things are not in my control, I can only give my best, then nothing stops you from taking action. It is not about not taking action, because not taking action is also an action.
Yes.
Life is conditioned in this manner that you have to take action.
Yes.
But whether it is right action or wrong action, what it will lead to, what it will not lead to, that is all the ruminations of the thinking mind, the ego mind. I mean, this whole nihilistic or fatalistic idea is a misunderstanding of this message.
Yes. There was something, though, we spoke about how the ego can never really be destroyed, but there's this term that you've used with the annihilate, kind of like an annihilation of it in some way. And I really feel that. And I know that it can never really be destroyed, but there is an idea that is being annihilated through this process of spiritual awakening.
So what happens is that even after spiritual awakening, you do react to certain conditions, because life is all based on action and reaction. Most of the life is reaction. There is a certain input, and based on that, you are acting. But that is not the ego. The ego is the one that continues what happens in the moment in horizontal time. So let me explain this. Let's say you had a tiff with a coworker in your office, and you had a disagreement, you reacted, okay, you said something nasty. Now, what happens is that is not the ego, problem ego, which reacted. The ego is the one which comes up afterwards, which creates all these thoughts. Why did I react? I should not have reacted. I will teach, or it can be the other way. It can be the grandiose, how dare they talk to me like this? Don't they know who I am? So it can show up as the victim, vulnerable, overt ego, or it can show up as the grandiose.
Yes.
The continuation of the thinking mind in horizontal time, that is the ego. So what dissolves, what annihilates is that thinking, not the biological organism thinking and reacting according to conditioning.
I see. Okay.
And so I'll just give you one example. I noticed this with a friend of mine. So he usually has his breakfast at 9:15 every morning. So I was at his house one morning, and the breakfast got delayed. So he got really upset. So he started becoming restless, and he would say, "Why is my breakfast not here? It's 9:15. His wife was a bit concerned because I was there. But again, she was occupied with some other work, so it got delayed. Now, what I noticed is in that moment was a child saying that I did not get my food. Okay, my mom doesn't love me.
Yeah.
That is the trauma which is triggering. Of course, that is ego, but that is not the problem ego, because that can be seen through and through. The problem ego is the one which comes up afterwards as shame, blame, and condemnation. So after that, he recognized that this has happened. So he apologized to his wife, and then he apologized to me. So I told him that, that is not the ego, the one that reacted initially. The ego comes up afterwards, which says, I'm a horrible person. I'm not worthy of love. That thinking, I'm not worthy of love. And what I say is, with this understanding of non-doership, even the conditioning changes to some degree, to some extent. Not all conditioning would change, but yes, it does bring about less reactivity. But again, pain in the moment will come. That will.
Yes.
Buddha gives this example of double arrows. So he says that the pain in the moment is like first arrow hitting your leg. It is going to be painful. And that arrow is there. And then there is an imaginary arrow, second arrow, which is the continuation of the first arrow. Why me? Why did God choose me?
Yes. Yes.
I may have done something bad in my previous births.
I'm not loved.
I'm not loved. First arrow can definitely, you cannot do anything about it. You have to go through that pain, through that intensity. But the second arrow is an imaginary arrow. That can be dropped. And the second arrow is the ego. The first arrow is not the ego.
That's so interesting. Wow. Okay. So reactions are not ego, actually. That's just the body, mind, organisms what's happening there then? Say you get upset. What is that then if it's not the ego?
Yes, that is just the natural reaction of the biological organism. See, even Ramana Maharishi would get upset when the toilets in the ashram were not cleaned, or if somebody gave him food and that food was not offered to others, he would get upset. There was one occasion where he heard the news of an old friend passing away, and there were tears in his eyes. So Ramesh would explain this in this way. He would say that if you call Ramana Maharishi by name, he would turn and see you. So that means the ego is there. The ego is required. I mean, you and me, we are having this communication because this ego separation is there. Otherwise, we won't be able to communicate. It is required, and that is why nature has given it to us. The only thing is that when it remains in its functional capacity, where it is only interested with the task of sustaining the mind-body organism, then it is fine. That is not the problem. But when it expands in horizontal time as becoming enlightened, becoming spiritual, becoming wealthy, becoming this, becoming that, that is what creates, that is what propagates the illusion. That is not real. And that is what he says. So again, one can always apologize if a reaction happens. I mean, if suppose
it happens,
something nasty to another person, you can always apologize to them. Say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. At the same time, beating yourself up for that why did I react? I'm unloved, and this building up stories around it, that is just the ego.
So how would you explain this idea of non-doership to someone who's never heard of it before? Because I think we're speaking from a perspective of like, I know because of what I've read from your work, and obviously you know it. So say someone was like, what, I've mentioned it to all of my friends since I came across it, and everyone's like, what? And they just stop in their tracks and they're like, what? So yeah, I would just love to hear, like, how would you, what is it? How would you describe it?
It's just like this, that all you can do as the divine puppet, all you can do is give the information. Now, whether the other understands it or doesn't understand
Wait,
it.
what did you say? All you can do is?
Is give the concept. Explain the concept.
Absolutely. Yes.
All you can do is say that you are not the doer.
Yes.
But whether it goes through them or it does not go, that is God's will and that individual's destiny. And now my piece is in only giving the message. I'm not concerned with anybody's peace, because if I make myself concerned with others' peace, how they are, then that also is a doership. You see? So it becomes doership. Why are they not understanding what I'm saying? Right?
But unless that comes naturally to you, then you would just do that.
Yes. But again, I cannot assume also that they will not understand. So I give the message. There's nothing more than that. Just tell them that they are not the doers. And you know what will happen? And I've seen this, that yes, initially they don't understand. I was speaking to a psychotherapist in the United States a couple of months back. At that moment when I was speaking to her, this did not make any sense.
She'd be like, what are you saying? My whole career is built on this.
Yes, and she herself was dealing with an addiction while being a therapist. And she was saying that it is devastating for me. Like, I cannot function. It has come to such an extent. And then, there were other problems like relationship mess and this and that. And I gave her this concept, just as I'm giving it here right now. I gave the concept. After the talk, she was like, okay, it's okay, but I don't get this totally. I said, don't worry, no problem.
Yeah.
Slowly, this will happen in your life. As you face life, as you face challenges, situations, you yourself will come across this fact. And after a couple of months, I got an email from her saying that, yes, it matches what you said, it matches my experience now. And I tell people that no scripture, no teacher, no guru is authority. Your own experience is authority. And the Buddha himself said this in one of the sutras. I don't know if it is Buddha's quote or not, but it stands. I have experienced this for myself. So your own experience is going to bring you to truth, not anybody else's words. Words are just, concept. They are just to explain a concept. They cannot awaken the heart.
Yes, yes. And the reason I find this concept of there's no doer so fascinating is because I've spoken about this in my other episodes as well. But, I've been sort of in the path of spiritual awakening for about 8 years. That's kind of when it started for me. And I had a glimpse of the true self at that point, just a very, very small glimpse, not enough to, you can say it's perfection. It's all God's will the way it happened because it got me into this line of work as well. And throughout that time, I did a lot of self work, a lot of inner child work, a lot of healing, a lot of trauma work. I think what happened was basically I got to a point where I had done all this work. But like we spoke about, if we're consistently in the realm of the wounded self, the self doesn't stop becoming wounded. Like you can build a identity. Like, for example, I would build a more empowering self, right? One that's like, got really good self-worth and, is feeling enough and all that stuff. And I was doing that. But ultimately, what I saw was I was still hanging out in that realm. And as long as I thought that that's what I was and I was separate from God, that pain would always be there. Right. And I think what happened was my ego hit a point where I just went, like, you try everything, you try all the things, and then you go, but why hasn't that pain shifted yet? That fundamental pain is still there. It's like, okay, I'm still kind of, okay, cool, it's happening, but I'm still suffering because of all of this pain. And I still feel like God is separate. It's not like I don't feel God. And I think then seeing this action of these words of there is no doer, it's like, so then what are you saying? That, like, what's been happening then? What am I doing? What's going on? Like, it's so confusing actually. And now, because it happened, and it's kind of, I think Ramesh Balsekar spoke about it being called deliverance, which is you have the awakening and then it takes time to integrate. It just happens over time as you interact with the world and everything. So as my deliverance is taking place, it's bringing up more of those things to the surface, and I'm able to see it.
But I have one thing about the concept of deliverance, that deliverance is part of duality, right? Because usually what happens is that the self, the ego mind, measures deliverance as becoming better, as becoming more integrated.
Yeah.
What happens is this, that the awakening is usually spontaneous. You get a glimpse and that's it. You have had a glimpse. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. After that, still the ego mind arises. Now it says that since this has happened, the awakening has happened, it should benefit me in some way, right? So it
I
says
should not be in
that,
pain anymore because I saw the bliss. I felt the bliss. So why am I in pain? Yeah.
and so it creates a sort of a story. It says that now this information, the reality which has been seen, should become a part of, it should embody, itself. And I should somehow become better. Now that is a part of the story of the character. Of course, some changes happen. Some changes do happen. The reactivity comes down because nothing sticks. But what you will find is, after awakening, you will find yourself more sensitive. In fact, you will experience emotions in more intensity because the thinking mind has subsided. So now there is space of pure awareness. And in that, every emotion is expressing itself fully. But again, since there is no attachment to any emotion, it just comes up, plays in all its intensity, whether good or bad, and then it subsides. After that, there is no thought like, why did I experience this? I should not be like this. So, yes, the deliverance also happens, but what is happening is a part of duality. So, too much concern with deliverance or the thought that I am not there yet, or that I have not attained it, I have not achieved it, is also a trap of the ego. The ego that is concerned with becoming better, becoming this, becoming that. What Ramana Maharishi says, the truth is here and now. This moment, this here, I call it moment, but actually it's not a moment. It's just here and now.
But now,
This is your refuge. It is never that you will be able to overcome all challenges in life. That never happens. The human entity is weak. It is not tough enough to fight all the forces of nature. The acceptance of this fact brings about a peace of a very different quality. In that peace, everything is accepted. So yes, anxiety may still come up, depression may still show up, restlessness, irritation, anger, all those things may still show up, but there is no container around it. There is no formation
of me, and this is coming up for me, and so it means this about me.
Yeah. And usually what happens is that when you think of deliverance as a benefit of spiritual awakening, then you start chasing deliverance. Then you start thinking that maybe if I listen more to non-duality lectures, or maybe if I go to more teachers, then somehow I will become more and more.
I'll get it.
Yeah. Everything has benefits. I'm not saying that all practices are bad. I myself, I do meditation, I do yoga, I do stretching, I do all of those things, but they're never done with this intention of achieving or becoming something. I stretch when my body feels stiff. I do meditation. I want some peace and calm. But there is never this thought that I have to become a better person, or that concern has completely dropped away. Because once you accept yourself the way you are, that itself drops the ego. To know the ego is its dissolution. There is nothing to be done as such. When you see it for what it is, that itself brings down cuts down the ego. There's nothing more after that. Yes, the character will always feel incomplete, trying to achieve this. The character is conditioned for that. That cannot be stopped.
It's a job.
But you just look at that as character's conditioning. Then you're already free from it. There is a difference between getting involved in something and getting engaged in something. So what happens is, when you realize this whole non-doership concept, you actually start engaging with the world, but you don't get involved in the drama of the world. And the drama of the world includes everything, that things should be like this, deliverance should happen, enlightenment should happen, this should happen, that should happen. All that begins to fade away.
Well, I think it's a very common thing to a trap to fall under, but maybe that's the story of the character as well, is to say that if I do all these things, then I will, wake up to my true nature. I will, get enlightened. And then once I'm enlightened, then I won't feel pain anymore. I won't have to take part in this anymore. And I think that is just like a big joke. It's because, but there are teachings that I think maybe frame it like that, but maybe it's misconstrued. There are teachings about it, because you think bliss, right? If you say the word bliss, what do you think? You're like, oh yeah, okay, that means that I am going to be Satchitananda. Oh wow, I'm always going to be in this state. But it's becoming aware of that blissful nature, that it is here all the time. That is our awareness, that it is here as we engage with life. That is what we're looking for.
Suffering is always personal, but bliss is never personal.
Oh.
The truth is, and the words Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss, this trinity actually is one and the same thing. The being is consciousness is bliss.
Yes.
So most people confuse that bliss with the euphoria or ecstatic,
like happiness, like ecstasy. Yes.
It's not that happiness, because happiness of thrill and excitement, that is all temporary. It comes and it fades. What bliss truly is, this being, this pure presence, which is free from all concepts of being a person. And there are moments when you see glimpses of that. Being a person is not your continuous experience. If you notice this, when you're working, when you're involved in work and you're doing this and that, speaking to people, you don't think of yourself as me doing this act. The act simply happens. It's only when you remember yourself as the individual, it is only then that you say, oh, I am doing this, right? So, I mean, the concept of, again, bliss is again misunderstood. Bliss is basically the peace, which is a substratum, and it does not depend on the external circumstances or what is happening. It simply is this happening. So I'll just give you one concept from Maharishi Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Mhm.
He would say that what you experience as rest in meditation, stillness in meditation, is only a state. It is only a state. What you experience as movement in your daily waking life, as thinking, that is also another state of the mind. But he says these two are not separate, they are connected. You cannot know movement without stillness, and you cannot discover stillness outside of movement. Again, it's a bit of a wordplay, but if you look, the two cannot be known without each other.
Yeah.
But the whole experience of stillness and movement, that is the peace.
So the beingness within which it's occurring, is that what you mean?
Yes, it is not a separate state. The beingness is the ground where all experiences are happening,
Yes.
positive or negative.
Not separate.
It is
Yes.
not that only.
It's not
It is
separate.
not that only blissful experiences. So everything is happening in
Yes.
this ground,
Yes.
and the realization is basically seeing of that. The glimpse is of being, the glimpse of awakening, because being implies the absence of the person, the personality.
But actually, beingness, I was listening to one of the Upanishads, Mundukya Upanishad, and one of the examples that they were giving about that was the example of gold, and how gold is a material through which, a necklace and earrings and bracelets and everything is made out of that. And you don't look at it and go, is this gold? Is this a necklace? You're not quite sure. They come together. It's the gold that allows the form to arise. But without the gold, the necklace can't exist. So without the mind, without beingness, mind can't exist. That's how it, and I'm just starting to really feel that they like how they are one and the same in terms of they come together. But they're not together, they're one.
The mind is made up of the same substance as the being.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is the stillness, the pure potential actualizing itself as manifestation. This is what Ramesh called.
Yes.
So think of being as consciousness at rest, and think of mind as consciousness in movement, but they are one and the same.
Oh, I love that. Can you say that again? That was so good.
Being is consciousness at rest, and the mind is consciousness as movement, but they are one and the same. They are not two.
And how interesting that we tend to see the mind or the ego as the enemy, or we see the samsara as the enemy of the thing that's preventing us from experiencing our true nature, while all of it is our true nature. How interesting that is like a thing that we're caught in.
Yes, true. This is the whole scheme of this ego mind. It wants to pinpoint something, because then it has somebody to blame. So either it pinpoints an object. If it can't find an object, it will blame God. I mean, God can also be an object.
Yes.
But if it doesn't find anything else, then it starts blaming itself, that I am at fault, right? But if you see that everything is an effect, there is no true cause to anything. A certain event happened, a certain cause gave rise to an event, then that became the cause, and that gave rise to another event. Now, if you start tracing that chain, you will eventually reach to the origin of the universe. Let me just give you one example to clarify this. Let's say person A had a trauma because parents were narcissistic. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that person lives with that story, and he says that my parents are to be blamed for my poor condition, for this, for my failed relationships, for this and that. So his ego pins the blame on an object, my parents. They are the result of my misery. But what actually happens if you see this? The parents themselves were subjected to an abuse, right? From their parents, and this goes on. So if you keep tracing this, you will eventually reach the beginning of the universe. You will actually come down to nothingness, pure nothingness. So that is where this message appeals to people, because once you realize that there is no true cause to anything, it is very easy to accept oneself as not being the doer, but it is very difficult to accept the other person as not being the doer,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
when,
Especially if they've hurt you or
when
something. You're like, how can I just let this go? Because if I admit I'm not the doer, then neither are they. So what is going on?
doing good. Yeah. And of course, so the ego comes up with the story, with the projection, no, that there is a person there who has hurt a person here. But the person here is an image. The person there is also an image. So it is the image interacting with another image.
Mm.
Now, whatever I try to do to change the other doesn't help because the image's nature is to change. The ego's nature, ego is a
Oh,
flux.
as you're speaking, I'm like realizing things. This is just crazy. Keep going. Oh, your words have always, I think, because I don't know, I think because you channel these teachers that were just in such a state that on the realization that when you speak, Jagjot, and your words, I always have realizations to them. It's crazy. I'll be sitting and I'll be reading your blog and I'll be crying because I'm like, oh my God, I just realized that. So I just had to say
It's
that.
just that, again, it's just that this instrument resonates with that instrument.
Yes, exactly. That's it.
I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. You're just like, okay, cool, sweet.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what I say is that it is let's say
perfectly
when
okay
you see the other person as not being the doer and you also see yourself as not being the doer, it is perfectly okay still to keep your preferences, to keep your likes and dislikes. It's not that if my neighbor is an unkind person or if my
Mm,
colleague is abrasive, or then I have to get along with them, or I have to necessarily,
because everything is love.
uh,
Because everything is
yeah,
love, so
because
I should
every,
accept them.
yeah,
No.
yeah, no, no. It's not that I have to get along with them, or I have to change them, or I have to change myself for them. It is all a story. Neither can you change the other person, nor can you change yourself. Just, if you think about it, you don't have the power to change yourself also. Now,
That's so funny. When you say
yeah,
you don't have the power to change yourself, so then what are all those people who are working on themselves? What do you think they're doing? What is happening there?
that is again the that is again the ego story, the ego mind trying to pacify itself that it is working to become better.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
It is doing something to become better. It is
yeah.
constantly telling that story to itself. No, I am becoming better. My communications are improving. See, I tell people there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with any teaching. There's nothing wrong with therapy. Anything that helps you, anything that gives you peace in the moment, by all means, go for it. I also speak to different people, different teachers sometimes. That is the need of the biological organism. But you
Yes.
see, once you get caught up in that story, that I will not be fixed unless and until I do this or do that, then you will keep running your entire life. Because what is broken, the ego, what is broken, the ego mind, the wounded ego mind, is trying to heal itself by scratching the wounds.
Yeah.
Let me do
Yeah.
this, let me do that, let
Yeah.
me experience
Yeah.
this, then maybe I will be better.
Yeah.
Its nature is pain.
Yes.
The nature is suffering because that is separation from the source. Once this is understood, one starts becoming comfortable with oneself, the way they are. First thing is the acceptance comes that, okay, this is what I am. Maybe I am this way, I'm more oppressive, I'm reactive. First thing is that realization. And then comes the understanding that there is nothing I can do to change this. Of course, all the teachings, all the practices are going to help. So I never say don't do any practice. That is not my message. I say all practices are going to help you if you are destined for a particular path, for a particular teaching, for a particular practice.
Yes.
Go for it. By all
And
means,
if it
go for it.
calls to you, right? Because I think at the end of the day, it comes back to that same thing of do what you feel like doing. If you feel like doing it, do it. But don't do it with the impression that by doing this, somehow you're going to come out of something which is ultimately separation. Because if you're still hanging around in the realm of the ego, that separation, even if you build the most amazing identity of, the girl or the boy, the man or the woman who's totally healed and has a great relationship, with their parents or whatever the story is, and you build that. If you're still hanging around in that, I don't think it's ever going to satisfy that that ultimate pain of separation.
It has to be seen for what it is. And
Mm.
again, this is also not about denying yourself, denying your own emotions. It is not about suppressing your
Yes.
emotions. On the contrary, I'm saying feel everything,
Mm.
feel it to complete intensity. Because
Mm.
what happens is that when something arises, some unpleasant, uncomfortable emotion, what sustains is the resistance that comes from the other end. The resistance that says, I must not feel this. That
Mm.
actually continues the suffering, that continues the pain.
Mm.
Once
Mm.
the resistance is dropped, even the
Mm.
first initial
Mm.
feeling, it does
Mm.
not have the momentum to go on.
Yes. And the resistance is from the ego itself.
From
Yeah.
both are from the ego. Even the sensation is from the ego and the resistance is from the ego. The root of it is the
Mm.
same, the ego. But
Mm.
when one is dropped, the ego does not have the strength to sustain the other one. The other one also drops. It
Right,
is
right.
felt in
Okay.
the experienced in the moment as pain. The suffering happens in the moment, but it does not continue. It does not become the part of our story. And that's what brings peace.
Mm. Wow. So, one other thing that I've noticed in your message is that all the stuff we're speaking about right now, it just happens when it happens. So I think you've mentioned that the mind turns inwards. I think what you said before was just if you get to know the ego, that is the end of that causing you suffering or that turning into suffering in horizontal time, right? But that process of knowing the ego is also not in our control. That is also God's will. It's like when you turn inwards, is not you're not in control of it. It just happens when it happens. And I don't and I, that's something I've been thinking a lot about, because a lot of people, from a young age, they've been saying to me that, how is it that this age you're like saying all this and feeling all this and whatever, they say all this stuff in society. And I say, I don't know. From a young age, I just wanted to go home to God. I just wanted it. I don't know why. It's been a longing since from far I can remember. And then there's some people that don't have that longing in that same way. And it's like, I don't know there is no way to find out what it is.
I feel that everybody has that longing. It is there.
Mm,
It just doesn't manifest for everyone in the same way, in the same path. And I
mm,
say that it is not that only non duality or Advaita teaching is going to liberate you. It's not like that.
mm,
You can do anything, or you can even get it by doing nothing as well. I mean, I
mm.
have come across people who don't know anything about spirituality or Advaita, but their behavior, their actions, everything,
Yes,
living
that's true.
close to them, I can see that they
That's
they
true.
they have this understanding. I mean, it's difficult to explain in words this thing, but yes, they have this understanding. It's as if they were born with this understanding. However, that is not true. I mean, we all go through conditioning and
Mm,
challenges.
mm,
So coming back to the point, I feel that whatever circumstances that are happening in our life, no
mm.
matter how painful, whether it is suffering of a loved one, loss of a loved one, or fighting a disease, an illness, whatever it is all pushing us towards the direction of the wholeness.
That's true.
And that
That is definitely
which
true.
is here and now. So, yes, it may not manifest in your life as a spiritual teaching, it may manifest in
Mm,
different forms. Maybe
mm,
you go through life's tough journey and then you come to a realization that there is nothing in my control. It is
yeah.
not that you have to listen to Advaita to get it.
Mm. Yes,
The
yes.
getting
And it
is the
happens.
will of God.
And do you think it also happens through experience? Which, of course, I'm speaking to the ego's experience. But for example, a lot of my realizations that of being pulled to this path has been because I have gone out and sought happiness from things outside of myself and seen that that is a dead end. So the ego itself has seen for itself. This is something I feel is
Yes,
true. The ego needs to see for itself what is
yes,
going on. Only then it realizes, because otherwise it's just like, oh, I'll get a job and I'll climb the corporate ladder and I'll get into a relationship and I'll be happy. But then it doesn't feel
yeah,
happy. And then it's like, oh, okay. So for example, I think for a lot of people, like I often, I look at my parents and they have their own way of, experiencing all of this, of course. And a lot of people society and people around me as well that have their own ways of experiencing life. And I often see that I used to look at them and go, how do they not see it? They're gonna get to like 70 and then they're gonna be like, oh my God, what is this? I worked so hard. But I think that's the thing, is like you have to go through it yourself. You have to see it for yourself. And that's what gives rise to the, I don't know if it's a desire in for the ego or what it is, but there's some desire that comes through. Or maybe the longing comes through more strongly because you've seen that this doesn't work.
Yeah. The ego sees the futility of its own existence. That
Yeah.
is what happens.
Yeah.
And that itself drops down the resistance. Otherwise, you can keep repeating affirmations all your life that I'll be good, I'll be this, I'll be that. Nothing will work. But once the ego sees its true nature, which is wholeness, which is the light, pure light of being, then there is no motivation, there is no urgency, there is no nervousness or restlessness to continue in any direction. You just live in the moment, you go with the flow of life. So that, because this happened in my case, I was completely a corporate guy. And my whole ambition was to climb up the corporate ladder. And I used to work very hard. And I was very good at my work. But in the end, I got everything I wanted, but there was no peace. So at some point, I realized that what is this? What is all this happening? I mean, I wanted this. I fixated a goal for myself. I wanted it. It gave me money. It gave me recognition, everything. But still, I'm not happy. Then there is something missing.
Yes.
And the search began to find that missing link. And in that itself was a journey. So yes, you're very right in that sense that the ego comes to the futility, understands the futility of doership.
Can you define futility for me in this context?
Futility as in that thinking that I can do something to change an outcome, to bring about an outcome that is in my alignment, that is in alignment of what
I have control over this, that something I do can result to something. Yes.
I can manipulate. I can
that's
change.
A tough one.
Yes, I tell people, if you think you can control something, do it.
Do it. Yeah.
Okay, do it. Do it and see what happens.
Yes.
End of the you'll be banging your head against the wall.
Yeah. And I think that you kind of need to, it's like I don't know. I needed to. I don't know. I had to go down that road because that's just the road that my mind went down. I had to see the end of it or go to wherever it took me to be like, literally, I think I told you this in our conversation earlier that last time we spoke that, I felt like the ego took the weapons. It's on a battlefield. It's been fighting a war for a long time. And it took the weapons and it just dropped them and said, I'm done. It was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know. I don't know where to go anymore. I have no road to go. I can't do it. I can't control it. It didn't work. Our strategy did not work.
So, life takes its own course and it is full of surprises. Any moment it can bring pain, it can bring pleasure. And the illusion of control is what creates the pain and suffering in our lives. So when the need to control and change, that begins to dissolve as a result of dissolution or annihilation of the ego, then, one experiences peace in what is happening. The things may still happen the way they happen. The circumstances may still be same, but what changes is your attitude, your perception of how you see things.
How you see it. So maybe to wrap up our conversation, how would you describe spiritual awakening? What would you say it is for you?
I don't know if I can put it in words because I never asked for awakening. It just happened. It is simply a happening, I believe. And I don't know how to describe it. I don't have any words because awakening does not happen to an individual. The awakening is the absence of the person, the absence of the individual. And again, it's very paradoxical.
So good.
You cannot make any intellectual sense of it, other than that you feel a sense of union with everything. I think that is what it is because, of course, there is a veil of separation which creates a notion of you and a notion of me. but the being which is powering both of us, that essence is common, that is the same.
Yes.
And a recognition of that essence itself brings about a lot of peace.
So beautiful to
Because
recognize
once,
that and everything.
yeah, I mean, once you remain in that space, there is generally full engagement. Like I'm engaging you fully, completely.
Yes.
But
Yes.
there is no involvement in anything. Like I'm not much concerned who my words are making sense to, who is understanding, who is not understanding.
Yes.
It is not in my control.
Yeah. Yeah. It is not in your control because you don't exist in the way that you thought you used to. It's like, so it doesn't matter.
I say, yeah, you live your life and enjoy the moments you have, and that's it. There's nothing more to it as such.
Yeah. I think there was one thing that you did say in one of your pieces, though, which I think really resonated, where you mentioned that whatever the experience of awakening is for each individual is unique, right? That's going to be whatever it is for each person, however they experience that beingness and that lack of the separate self. But what you did mention was after awakening, you're not living in this blissful state of just nirvana where everything is calm and everything is beautiful. There's things are going to arise, but there's an acceptance of what is exactly as it is. And I think that's a really important thing to touch on, because people who are seeking enlightenment or seeking awakening or in the awakening process, I think that they somewhere feel that the reason that they want it so bad is because they think that they're not going to experience the pain and the suffering anymore. I think we need more living, practical examples of people who are engaged in life while living in that state, or being in beingness. Yeah.
Very true. What usually happens is that when there is a challenge in life, when there's some sort of suffering, the ego usually tries to find an escape from that suffering. So what people think is that maybe if I go on a particular spiritual path, if I understand the scriptures, or maybe spend time with gurus or serving them, devotion, this, that, then maybe that will heal me. But slowly, what they find is that again, the same set of circumstances keep coming back. Now they have different manifestation. Earlier, they were in terms of finances, relationships. Here, they are in some other terms, but the challenges are always there. So at some point, ego gets tired fighting. And in that surrender is the peace. And what happens is that, again, as I mentioned earlier, that our perception towards life changes. The need to control life is not there anymore. And it is very difficult to explain this to somebody, because people often say that you say that see things as they are. But how do we see things as they are? Now, I tell them there is no way for the individual to see things as they are, because individual, the ego by nature is a filtered perception. It is always going to see things the way it thinks is what it is, or what should be or should not be. But there is a vision beyond it. That vision is, all the spiritual masters have spoken about that vision. That is the vision of the pure awareness. That is the witnessing of everything arising, where there is no judgment, there is no filtering. Jiddu Krishnamurti called it total attention. Scriptures call it witness consciousness, Sakshi Bhav. That perception is completely, entirely different, because that is a very peaceful perception. It does not involve the subject. It is only seeing things as they are. Again, it is very difficult to put this in terms of words. So no matter what happens, when the witness arises, there is usually no concern with what has happened. It is simply seen. And in that seeing, a lot of knowledge comes about what is. The seeing is what is actually.
Okay, so the seeing is what is, exactly as it is.
Yes, exactly. Like Ramesh Valsekar would give one example. That say you're sitting in the lobby of a hotel and people are walking inside. Now you're watching them. So you're watching somebody entering, you're watching their shoes, their clothes, their luggage, their behavior, and continuously the mind is running. They are like this. The clothes they're wearing are like this. Continuously the mind is running. But at some point, that whole perception drops and you simply see the entire scene, where people are coming in, and everything is just happening. It just gets connected in one. So there is no thought in that. It is only the pure seeing, the pure witnessing of what is. And that is the restfulness, what Buddhists talk about. That is the core of mindfulness, and the core of the all meditations. And that state is not in control of the individual to bring it about. It just happens. It just happens. And it happens for each one of us. It's just that we don't recognize it. Now, if somebody is destined to see it, even if once that is seen, it is immediately known that yes, this is it. After that, there is no confusion. After that, there is no doubt.
And so, what you were saying made me think that even when we say acceptance of what is implies a level of duality, because then there is a person accepting something. But
Yes.
what you're saying is that when you are beingness and there is a witnessing happening, there's nothing but acceptance. That is all there is.
Yes.
Because you are just engaged, you're in it. There's no subject object. You're not going, oh, I have to accept this reality now. Oh, let me accept myself. Let me accept what's going on in front of me. This person is so annoying. Let me accept them. It's not like that.
Yes. That is sort of what I relate to the concept of dhyan, where it is not that the mind is not there. Mind is there in witnessing, but the mind is completely in stillness. It is not moving. So there is only movement, but there is no one observing the movement. So like Jiddu Krishnamurti says that there is only the observation. There is no observer. So that brings about a lot of change, even in the individual's perspective.
Yes, because to say that there's an observer, no, sorry, you continue.
Yeah, no. So, the individual does get to know that something has been seen. It is like that when you are in deep sleep, there is pure witnessing. When I say pure witnessing, I mean you see the absence of objects. It is not that there is nothing. Because if there was nothing, you would have never known. When you wake up, you say that
That's
I didn't see anything in my deep sleep. How do you know that? You know that because something was there.
That's
pure
it.
awareness.
That's how you know you went
Light
into
will-
deep sleep.
True. That is our base. You see, this beautiful awareness is every day we experience it as deep sleep. Every day. But it's just a matter of recognition. When it is destined for the individual and it is recognized, then that becomes more or less one state in the waking itself.
There's so much humility in that, in knowing that it happens when it happens, when it's destined to happen. And there's nothing that you can try and do to control it or bring it about. You can just do exactly what you feel like doing, whatever you're called to do. It is just completely God's will. Like, I think in my field of work, a lot of us say, you just need to surrender, just surrender to this. And it's just like, I remember every time I heard that, I was like, I don't know what you're saying. What do you want me to do? Like, I'm trying, but I don't know how to. What do you mean? It's like, it's not possible. And I think when I read that from your words, I was like, yeah, there's just, you can't do it. So then that brings me to the point of, okay, well, if I can't surrender and say my mind is, for example, overthinking, or it's going around in circles, then I've kind of realized then that's it. That's all you do. You just keep doing that. Let it happen. Just let that happen, because that's what's happening.
What is bound to happen will happen. If involvement is destined for the individual, the involvement will happen. There's nothing the person can do about it. But again, that said, I always tell people that just because of this concept, don't abandon your practices. Keep going with your practices.
Yes.
But do them with a different perspective. When you sit for meditation with the objective that you have to calm your mind, the mind is very clever. It knows that this is your base. You want to quiet. So for that duration, when you're in meditation, it's always quiet, and it will show you all the bliss in the world. It will show you emptiness, samadhi, whatever you can think of, complete nothingness. It will show you everything. But the moment you get up, go about your work, start meeting people, all those situations, those challenges, they will come back.
Yeah.
It is only recognizing this nature of mind. So when the unreality is seen, it drops, and then what remains is reality. So
And I think
darkness and light
that's
are not two.
mm,
Darkness and
mm,
light are not two. Because darkness is seen by you. So you are the light. Otherwise, if darkness was really there, how would you know about it? The only way you know about it is because your light is shining on that darkness. So it is all light. There is no duality.
darkness and light are not two. Yes. Would that be applicable to kind of happiness and sadness are not two?
Yes, they're states of mind.
The
So
polarities.
happiness and sadness, yes, they're states of mind. But the peace is embedded in both of them. The peace is there in sadness, the peace is there in happiness. Just a matter of recognition. That
It's
can be
just because
jumped off.
you're noticing. It's the you that notices it is it.
Yeah, is the being. So it always comes down to its restful state. That is why I say being here and now is your refuge, is your home. If you feel anxious, come back here. It is not a method, there is no way to come back here. It is just that
Yeah, it just is.
sometimes
Yeah.
yeah, it just is. Sometimes you won't be able to do that. It depends on the circumstances. But whenever you get an opportunity,
Yeah.
see, a lot of people confuse this. They say that, the Sagat Datta Maharaj says, stay with the I am. So they take it as if it is a practice prescribed by Nisarga Datta Maharaj, that stay with the I am and then you will attain enlightenment. And this, the mind becomes vigilant. Then it says that maybe if I meditate for 6 hours, if I stay with the I am for 6 hours, 7 hours, then maybe I will realize it faster. So you get caught up in that whole game of becoming, attaining, and this and that, right? That is not what Maharaj is saying. That is not what Ravana Maharishi is saying when he says stay with the I thought. What he's simply saying is that when the remembrance comes, when you remember to be, just be. And there is no way to be. Because to say that there is a way to be means to be this or that. Your nature is be.
And what's so beautiful about it is that when you experience it, it's like the most obvious thing. It's so obvious that it's funny, to look everywhere. It's like I was giving my client the example the other day. Like imagine looking at this necklace and it's gold and going, where's the gold? I don't see it. Where's the gold? And just looking at it again and again, and you're like, I can't see it. Where is it? It's made of it. It's made of it.
Similarly, you are made of the being, the light.
Yeah.
So it's not that the light is not there. I mean, it's always there.
Yes.
And with that knowledge, even during challenging times, a lot of relief comes, a lot of capacity to bear the pain comes. It does help the psyche in some way or the other.
Yes.
But yes, the fundamental conditioning of human beings, it does not change. The fundamental, it's not that you all of a sudden you become sage-like, and because even a sage has that reptilian brain. It is a part of, it has been given to us by nature. So yes, we are going to get upset, we are going to get angry, we are going to experience all emotions. The nature is not selective with emotions. There's nothing which can shield you from all emotions. You're going to experience all emotions. It's just that one thing is you experience them in full intensity and then you realize their illusoriness.
Because they're not clinging on to any character in the same way. They're and I think the main thing is that story of us, the narrative of us. So if sadness arises and then suddenly we link it back to, oh, my mom did this when I was young, or, this person left me, that's the story, then it gets deeper and deeper. That's when I think the resistance also comes up. But if that story is not there, then it's just a sensation.
Yeah, and a lot of people get confused by this. They think that it is denying that, say, somebody who has gone through a trauma or abuse, they feel that this message is denying that by calling it a story, or invalidating that by calling it a story. It's not that. We are never denying anything. We acknowledge that that something traumatic happened. We give it full attention. It's not that or that we are saying that you shouldn't do anything about it.
We're not bypassing it.
We're not bypassing it. But yes, how long are you going to continue with it? That's the thing. The longer you continue with that story, you are loading yourself with guilt, shame, and it just continues the whole cycle of suffering. But once that is dropped, once the story is dissolved, it is the end of me and my story.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the image that I got when you were speaking was like, imagine this. I was kind of thinking like my ego as this like child that was just going out and trying to find solutions to all the things that I was feeling, and so just doing all these things until ultimately it got tired because none of those solutions fully took the pain away in any way. Like the pain didn't stop, right? The pain never stopped. The sadness still came. So then it turned inwards because it's like it's trying to fix, it's trying to, like you said, blame or outsource that to someone that, okay, if I was to just fix this thing in myself, then I'll be at peace. If I was to just fix this pain of abandonment, of rejection, of unworthiness, then I'll be at peace. I'll feel good. I'll feel whole. But the thing that's trying to feel whole is its essence is separation, which is just, oh, it's mind bending.
It is cool.
Okay, amazing. Is there anything you would like to say to close our conversation today?
I'll only say this much that, live your life to the fullest. Whatever the moment brings you, enjoy that in that moment, rather than worrying about a future happiness or future idea of an happiness. And live your life spontaneously. That spontaneity, that simplicity is peace. There's nothing else other than that. There is no enlightenment. There is no master. There is no authority that can bring about enlightenment. Your own experience is the final authority, the experience which stands the test of time. So, I would just embrace life.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Embrace life as it is.
Nothing complicated.
And know that, for me, it's like, know that ultimately, not that you're going home to yourself, ultimately you are home with yourself and you will realize it when it's time.
Yeah. So Maharaj said, in one of his quotes that you ultimately realize that you never left.
Yeah. Oh, imagine that. You're like, what? I was always here. I never left. I was always arrived.